Before we begin, imagine this for a moment. The hottest week of the summer had pushed our quiet neighborhood in Savannah, Georgia to the edge. The air refused to move, the roads shimmered under endless heat, and everyone hid behind closed doors. Then, just before midnight, there was a soft knock on my front door. When I opened it, my beautiful neighbor, Grace, stood there smiling under the pale moonlight. She simply told me she wanted to go for a midnight swim because the heat was unbearable. But as I looked at her, I realized something that made no sense at all. She hadn't brought a swimsuit. I had no idea that the next few hours would uncover a heartbreaking secret that would change both of our lives forever. If you believe kindness can change someone's destiny and everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone you care about, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. I had lived in that quiet neighborhood for almost 6 years after moving from Chicago to start over. My name is Nathan, and after a painful divorce and losing my father within the same year, I had become the kind of man who preferred silence over conversation. My small backyard overlooked a neighborhood lake where residents often gathered during summer evenings, but I rarely joined them. Grace had only moved into the house next door a few months earlier. She was friendly but reserved, always smiling politely yet carrying a sadness that seemed impossible to hide. That night, as we walked toward the lake beneath the glowing moon, the silence between us felt strangely comforting. The warm breeze finally began to cool, and the water reflected thousands of tiny stars. When we reached the dock, Grace quietly slipped off her sandals and sat with her feet dangling over the edge instead of jumping into the water. That was when I realized she had never intended to swim. The invitation had been nothing more than an excuse to escape the walls of her own home. For several minutes neither of us spoke. Then, with tears filling her eyes, Grace admitted that she couldn't bear being alone any longer. Only 8 months earlier, her husband, Michael, had died unexpectedly from a heart condition during one of the worst heat waves the city had experienced. Since then, every hot summer night reminded her of the terrible evening when she had lost the love of her life. She confessed that she had walked to my house because she didn't trust herself to spend another night alone with those memories. Her words struck something deep inside me. I had spent years pretending my own grief no longer existed, but hearing someone else's pain gave mine a voice again. I admitted that after losing my father and watching my marriage collapse, I had convinced myself that closing my heart was the safest way to survive. Instead of healing, I had simply become comfortable with loneliness. For the first time in years, I realized I wasn't the only person quietly falling apart behind closed doors. The following weeks changed everything. We never rushed into friendship, and we certainly never tried to replace the people we had lost. Instead, we simply became companions during the hardest hours of the day. We drank iced tea on our porches after sunset, helped elderly neighbors carry groceries during the heat wave, and volunteered together at a local community cooling center where dozens of struggling families found relief from the dangerous temperatures. Helping others slowly reminded us that our own broken hearts still had something valuable to give. As summer continued, our entire neighborhood began changing. Inspired by small acts of kindness, neighbors who had barely spoken before started checking on elderly residents every evening. Children organized lemonade stands to raise money for families whose air conditioners had failed. What began as one lonely midnight walk quietly transformed into a community built on compassion instead of isolation. One evening, several months later, Grace confessed that she no longer dreaded the arrival of hot summer nights. The memories of Michael would always remain, but they no longer controlled her life. Instead of seeing only the night she lost him, she had begun remembering all the joyful summers they had shared together. Watching her smile without forcing it felt like witnessing sunrise after the longest storm imaginable. Her courage inspired me to make changes I had postponed for years. I reconnected with my younger sister in Colorado after nearly 5 years without speaking. I reopened the woodworking business I had abandoned after my divorce. Most importantly, I stopped believing that healing meant forgetting the past. Healing meant carrying the past with enough strength that it no longer crushed the future. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who may need hope today. You never know whose life could be changed by a simple reminder that they are not alone. Before we reach the ending, tell us in the comments, have you ever experienced a moment when a stranger, or even a neighbor, helped you through one of the darkest seasons of your life? We'd love to read your story. Nearly 1 year after that unforgettable midnight, another heatwave settled over Savannah. This time, Grace knocked on my door again just before midnight. We walked back to the same quiet dock beneath the stars. Once again, there were no swimsuits, no plans to swim, and no desperate tears. We simply sat together, listening to the gentle sound of water brushing against the wooden pier. We smiled because we both understood something that had taken us years to learn. Sometimes people don't invite you somewhere because they need company for the destination. They invite you because they cannot survive the journey alone. That midnight swim never happened, but something far more important did. Two wounded strangers discovered that kindness has a remarkable way of finding those who believe they are beyond saving. And sometimes, the greatest rescue doesn't happen in deep water, it happens when one lonely heart quietly reaches another in the middle of a long, hot summer night.